Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Lincoln Lancaster County Planning Commission of July 12, 2023. A printed agenda is available outside the hearing room, and a copy of the full agenda, including the staff reports, is available online or at the Planning Department, room 213. The Open Meetings Act is posted just inside the doors at the back of the room. If you parked in the parking lot across the street to the north, the gate is open and no parking coupons are needed. Out of courtesy for those attending this meeting, commissioners and the staff, cell phones may not be used in the chamber during any portion of this meeting. We appreciate your cooperation. Please note the Planning Commission action today is final on the following items: 4.1 Special Permit 1965B and 4.2 Special Permit 23026. Any aggrieved person may appeal final action of the Planning Commission to the City Council or the County Board by filing a notice of appeal with the clerk within 14 days following the action of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission action on all other items today is a recommendation to the City Council or the County Board. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held June 28th, 2023. Is there a motion?
Go ahead.
So moved, Christie. Joy?
Second, Edens.
So Shelley?
Campbell,
Abstain.
Core,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Minutes approved, 5-0.
The next item of business is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be called at the same time and will not be scheduled for a separate public hearing unless there is a request from someone wishing to speak or at the request of a commission member. I will ask Shelley to read all the consent agenda items into the record. Once those items are read, she will ask if there is anyone wishing to speak. If you wish to speak on an item on the consent agenda, we would ask that you stand and state that item. That item will then be removed from the consent agenda and scheduled at a separate public hearing under Section 3 on today's agenda. All items remaining on the consent agenda will be voted upon in total with a motion for approval. Shelley, will you please call the items on the consent agenda?
First item on the consent agenda is item 1.1, change of zone 23053 from R2 Residential District to B1 Local Business District for Cooper Holdings LLC on property generally located at 2211 Winthrop Road. Next item, miscellaneous item 1.2, street and alley vacation 23003 to vacate West Cleveland Avenue between Northwest 48th Street, generally located at Northwest 48th Street and West Madison Avenue. I will note that a staff memo dated today, July 12th, identifying revisions to conditions of approval as agreed upon by staff and applicants should have been received to members today. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on these items?
No.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting any of these sites to be disclosed?
No.
Is there anyone here wishing to speak on these consent agenda items? Please stand and state that item.
If there is no one here who wishes to speak on a consent agenda item, I would entertain a motion.
I move. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I move to approve consent agenda items with the amended motion.
Second, Campbell.
Discussion. Any? Just vote. Okay.
Campbell?
Shelley?
Campbell?
Yes.
Core?
Yes.
Cruz?
Yes.
Edens?
Yes.
Joy?
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Approved 6-0.
There are no requests for deferral today, so we will now proceed to public hearing. Prior to the staff making a brief presentation, each staff person should state their name, agency, and address. The applicant will then be requested to present his or her testimony, followed by those who wish to testify in support, followed by those who wish to testify in opposition. The staff will then be given an opportunity to respond to the testimony, and then the applicant shall have an opportunity for rebuttal. Each person testifying should state their name and address and shall have 5 minutes to speak, unless additional time is requested and granted. The clerk will use the light system to help aid your timing for your testimony. The lights will appear on the monitors provided. The green light indicates the start time for testimony. The yellow light represents there is 1 minute remaining. The red light indicates that your 5 minutes has expired, and the clerk will indicate that your time is up. If during your testimony you have copies of documents or materials that you would like distributed to the Planning Commission members and/or included as a part of the record, please provide them to the clerk. The Planning Commission will vote immediately at the close of the public hearing unless the commission votes to defer action or to continue the public hearing. Shelley, please call the first public hearing item.
First item is item 4.1, Special Permit 1965B to amend existing Special Permit 1965A to allow for 48 multifamily units, 23 townhome units, 9 single-family units, and 5 unassigned units on property generally located at Northwest 48th Street and West Madison Avenue. This is final action. Note that a staff memo was sent to Planning Commission members dated today, July 12th, identifying revisions to conditions of approval as agreed upon by staff and applicant. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this application?
No.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting any of this site to be disclosed?
Also, no.
Emma Martin, Planning Department, 555 South 10th Street. This is an application to, this application is a request to amend Special Permit 1965A, Heartland Homes Northwest 1st Edition, which is a community unit plan, to allow 85 dwelling units, which include 48 multifamily units, 23 townhome units, 9 single-family units, and 5 unassigned units. This request also amends the layout of the internal private driveways. This application is associated with street and alley vacation number 23003, which proposes to vacate West Cleveland Avenue, west of Northwest 48th Street. Right there. And street name change number 23002, which proposes to change the name of Outlot A Heartland Homes Northwest 6th Edition from West Madison Avenue to West Madison Place. Right here. These are two associated, and there are 2 associated waivers which were previously approved with past full amendments. The applicant is requesting this amendment to minimize disturbance to existing grading and drainage within the CUP and reduce drainage issues on site. The revised layout results in a smaller footprint than the layout currently approved layout, which will result in less disturbance to the existing grading and drainage. This application amends the CUP to allow for multifamily units as well as townhome units and the already existing single-family units and 5 unassigned units for a total of 85 dwelling units. The current CUP also permits 85 dwelling units instead of apartments, allows for 46 townhomes and the 9 single-family homes and 30 unassigned dwelling units. The City of Lincoln design standards for community unit plans allow for 6.96 dwelling units per acre for CUPs in R3 zoning, which this CUP is in. This CUP is 12.33 acres approximately and permits 85 dwelling units, which complies with the Lincoln design standards. The private roadway, West Madison Avenue, will need to be renamed as West Madison Place as it will now end in a cul-de-sac. Street name change number 23003 has been submitted for this change and will be reviewed by the City Council. This application also shows the proposed vacation of West Cleveland Avenue, west of Northwest 48th Street. The vacation has been applied for separately and will be approved or denied separately from SP 1965B, and it was on the consent agenda. This current site plan shows the public street terminating in a cul-de-sac, and due to the cost associated with the construction of the cul-de-sac, the applicant has applied to vacate West Cleveland and convert it to a private driveway to avoid the cul-de-sac. The 2 properties north and south of West Cleveland take access from the public road as it exists today, so there will be a public access easement over the vacated right-of-way. The applicant has discussed this project and amendment with the individual owners of the townhomes within the CUP. There are 4 owners, 2 private companies, Venture Holdings LLC and the Northern Ponca Housing Authority, and 2 private citizens. Venture Holding LLC is also the applicant. At least 1 townhome owner within the existing CUP has made it clear that they do not support the amendment, but we have not received any specific grievances directed to the city. Excuse me. The Planning Department recommends approval for this application. The application is consistent with the comprehensive plan and complies with the requirements of the existing CUP. It remains within the limits of the number of dwelling units previously approved, and it complies. The site is shown for future urban residential, which allows for a variety of housing types and densities. That's all.
Any questions?
I do not.
We're letting you off easy today.
All right, thank you.
Good. Steve.
All right, testimony from the applicant.
Good afternoon. Rick Onen with ENA Consulting Group, 701 O Street, on behalf of the developer Venture Holdings. As Emma mentioned, this is a revision of an existing approved CUP, just to give you a sense of what that change is. The previously approved plan showed Cleveland Avenue extending through, as well as Madison Avenue, with a connection between. The new plan terminates Madison Avenue in a cul-de-sac, and then we would have a private drive connection through multifamily area, and then the Cleveland Street right-of-way would be vacated. So that's kind of things in a nutshell. I think she went through the changes in density from 46 townhomes to 23, and then 48 multifamily units replacing that. The revisions to Madison Avenue, the name change, we're working through that with the adjacent property owners. There's been a little resistance. Obviously, we understand that that's a very significant inconvenience to have to change your address. But we continue to work that process, and we will be in front of the city council with that at some point. We're also, as part of this, one of the conditions was to replat. There's an existing convenience store located here. It's currently on several old platted lots. One of the conditions was to replat that into a single lot. We're working with that property owner to get that done as well. So generally, we are in acceptance of the conditions of approval. There's been a lot of back and forth kind of in the last few hours in terms of language and amendments. Steve just kind of went over some things with me very quickly, and I'll trying to get my head around it. But I think from my standpoint, we had proposed a motion to amend, and I understand that the clerk said they were going to get that distributed to you. And okay, you did. All right. I'll just run through that, and then maybe Steve can rebut me. So on this document, the items that are in red text are per the memorandum that went out from the planning department this morning. The text in green is kind of our recommended changes. The change here on the first one, reducing this rear yard setback, is basically just revising the language to match what was approved on the previous CUP. Likewise, below that, there was a waiver, if you will, to allow decks to encroach into the rear yard. Again, we were just proposing to match the language from the previous application. Further down, section 2.3 is just a clarification that the Cleveland Avenue right-of-way that we're going to be providing the easement over will be vacated, rather than just calling it Cleveland Avenue. Similar thing on 2.6. Section 2.7, those were the planning department's recommendations, which we're fine with. 2.9 said to delete the two waivers from the special permit, but those would stay intact, and I believe Steve agreed that that language should come out. Again, the red was language that planning department was good with removal. And then finally, again, on the last item, referencing the vacated street, or required to build a sidewalk on the south side of what was, or what will be vacated Cleveland Avenue, and so just cleaning up some language. So I guess there's a little bit of variation in how the language goes between what we're proposing and what planning has proposed. I don't know that there's a significant difference. It's all about X's and O's, I guess. Other than that, I think I would just entertain any questions.
Yeah, Dick.
Just to clarify, the red changes are from the planning department and the green changes are from your suggestions?
Correct.
Okay. And is there anything remaining in there that where the two of you are in disagreement?
It's mostly semantics, I think. Steve can maybe share a little bit more on the difference. Like I said, he just kind of briefed me about 2 minutes ago on it. So, like I said, I think we were just going back to the language from the original approval. I think Steve mentioned that he felt like that was still intact, even though it didn't get carried forward to this application. So we just felt it was clearer to bring the language forward from the previous application.
And I could ask Steve this, but basically the staff is saying we'd prefer to see this updated language.
Yeah, you have to have Steve, the semantics.
Okay.
Questions?
So the storm sewer is still going to be converted to private, is that right?
Correct. There's a couple runs of storm sewer in that section of Cleveland Avenue that will be vacated, and that will become privately maintained.
And you guys are okay with that?
Yes.
You've worked it out?
Yes.
Okay.
What about the other people that dump into that storm sewer?
So, give you a picture of that, the best I can here. So the area we're talking about is right here in Cleveland Avenue. There's an inlet that picks up this lot, and there's an inlet that picks up this convenience store lot. There will be an agreement between, right now those two parcels are owned by the same individual. There will be an agreement in place between the owner of the apartment complex and these two properties for the maintenance of this portion of the street, and that will include the storm sewer.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. At this time, we'll have any testimony in support of this application. Is there anyone here who wishes to testify from a neutral standpoint or in opposition? Okay. Staff questions.
Yes, Steve, can you come up and answer that?
Steve Hendrickson with the Planning Department, 555 South 10th Street. So what's being passed out, and Rick was correct, this has been back and forth, including the memo they sent us 45 minutes before the meeting, and I'm sorry to get a bit late for this one, but was trying to compare that to what we had. So I'm hoping that this is the simplified version, and yes, just gave it to Rick during the meeting, so I understand why Rick didn't have a lot of time to look over it. But basically what we're trying to do is a few of the changes he had weren't necessary, and it's just in terms of, I'll agree, it's you say tomato, I say tomato. So how we list the waiver, is it from 23 and 22 feet to 20, or is it just to 20? Our preference is to list out that it's from 23 and 22 so that we're clear what were the setbacks, because this is a setback that is 30 feet or 20% of the lot depth. And there's two different lot depths, and so one, the setback would actually be 23 and one would be actually 22. So it's a very minor difference, and as the staff report pointed out, there's some open space between the setback and the people to the south anyhow, so even reducing it, there's yet another outlot in between the two of them. So they have their 20-foot rear yard, and then there's an outlot, and then there's the next neighbors. So there's actually a deeper setback than would be normal. And yes, so we had accidentally struck out their waivers in that condition. So that was a mistake. Sorry about that. But by leaving the waivers on there, there's no need to necessarily repeat the waivers that were previously approved. And this is kind of always a challenge we have is anything that was previously approved carries forward. Do you try to list everything that was previously approved or not? But it's not a waiver that we're in disagreement about. And the two other little changes really do clarify that when we were talking about making sure there's a public access easement shown over the driveway, it meant the driveway that is being converted, West Cleveland, a public street, being converted to a driveway, just that portion of it, because it has lots on either side. So I think with this, it gets everything that they had wanted done, and including the two waivers, and hopefully this is a little more straightforward to explain the changes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Questions for Emma? Okay. All right, applicant rebuttal.
Don't know that I have a whole lot of rebuttal. I guess I did, in terms of the setback statement, I don't know if the language about 23 or 20 feet makes a difference. It seems clearer if it's just 20 feet, but I guess I'll let you decide which version you appreciate more. Otherwise, I have nothing else.
Okay, any final questions? All right. Oh,
I
sorry.
should have asked Steve maybe. So like when we move to do this and we say, you know, like with the amendment, should we stay with the staff amendment or should we stay with the applicant's amendment?
This one, since this is the most recent and incorporates all of the feedback, I would be in favor of saying it's
The
this
staff.
one. There is a tiny change, and we can discuss that during debate, but, all right.
Just want to make sure.
Thank you.
Clarify on the record what you're talking about when you say this one.
Oh, well, so the one that Steve handed out versus the one that was emailed to us, they're a little bit different.
Okay, the one that was handed out at this.
Yes,
Yeah,
at the
hearing.
hearing.
Okay.
Would be a staff memorandum.
And is it dated, well, I think there have been a couple staff memorandums, and they're both dated the same date.
July 12th,
This says revision number 1.
yeah.
Should put the time on it.
Hours.
Correct.
Minutes.
Okay.
So if you want to handwrite in on the one we handed out just moments ago, staff revision number 2,
Okay.
maybe that'll help make it a little clearer.
All
So
right.
revision number 2 is the one we would recommend you do, includes the ones that were previously sent to you and that the applicant is fine with. The other version is the one that Rick emailed out. I don't think there's paper copies of it, and that would be the applicant's version.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for asking for clarification, so we'll make sure we have everything appropriately on the record. Okay,
I would move to close the public hearing.
Second, Joy.
Campbell,
Yes.
Core,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
yes.
Public hearing closed.
And I would move to approve special permit 1965B with the revision number 2.
Second core.
All right, we've got a motion, discussion.
This is a good fill-in project. It was previously approved. I think the developer is just trying to fit the neighborhood a little better, and so I'll be supporting this.
Any additional discussion?
Looks good to me.
No, I appreciate the back and forth and everybody working together to clean up the language. And in the issue of whether or not you just list what the setback is versus the comparison of what it was previously, I personally like having what it was previously in there just from a paper trail. Should there ever be a future zoning action that we could see why that decision was made. So I like having that in there. So, all right, Shelley.
Campbell.
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Cruz.
Yes.
Edens.
Yes.
Joy.
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Approved, 6-0. Next item is item 4.2, special permit 23026 to allow for a residential healthcare facility for up to 12 residents on property generally located at 3737 Calvert Street. This is final action. Are there any expert communications to be disclosed on this application?
No.
Are there any expert communications that took place or additional information learned while visiting any of this site to be disclosed?
Also, no.
Ben Callahan with the Planning Department, 555 South 10th Street, 68508. This is a request at 3737 Calvert Street. The request is for a special permit to operate a residential healthcare facility for up to 12 residents. Currently, the property is zoned R2. There's existing R4 residential to the north, and then the remainder east, west, and south sides are all surrounded by R2. A little bit on what a residential healthcare facility is. So within the zoning code, it calls out with a special permit that it could be limited to the following types of facilities. So assisted living, nursing care, memory care, convalescent home, hospice home, and a group home for more than 16. Within pretty much all of the residential zoning requires a special permit to be applied for before that would be allowed. Within the special permit specifically, there are different requirements, so they still have to meet the parking requirements as well as a density calculation. So in this case, the applicant on this lot is roughly 1.2 acres or around 53,000 square feet. Following what the special permit would allow, that would allow up to, I think, 26 individuals. They have limited it to 12. And then in the past, one thing important to mention is this would be the second time this applicant will be before you. So this was back in March, approved by this body, and then was denied by City Council. So they've resubmitted this application and made some revisions to what they originally applied for. One of them was a decrease in the number of residents. They did make some revisions to their site plan that had come up last time, and one of the larger ones was they're no longer proposing the addition to the home. So they are going to stick with the existing single-family home, and then would still be meeting all parking requirements. So they would still have 5 spots behind the existing attached garage and then 2 within. One of the largest conditions that they put on this is that they are proposing to limit the special permit to only assisted living and memory care. So that would be one limitation while it's in operation, and then as well as they wanted to note that if it was to ever be sold in the future, it could go back to a single family home if someone purchased it for that use, or it would still have to stay assisted living or memory care. Lastly, I want to mention in regards to the comprehensive plan, this does align for the goals of the comp plan. It tries to still provide different styles of housing for all ages, including senior living. So that is one thing with our complete neighborhood goals, is finding units within the existing city. And then lastly, I just want to show this exhibit, and this is strictly for relevance to density in the area. So with it being zoned R2, this shows how this area and the whole boundary technically could be urbanized and brought up to the same R2 density by right, by a final plat. So with this layout meeting the zoning standards, they could do a duplex in this home and then have 2 single family attached. So technically that lot is large enough for 4 single family units to be on it. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I'm gonna kind of just stick on that last thing you showed us for a second here, because I know that there's been some concern from neighbors about staff including that in the report. Can you kind of talk about your intentions of why you put that into the report?
Yeah, I think it truly was to show what a lot of that size in R2 could develop as, and a lot of times with prior applications as well, we would show that whole area on what could be there by right, what the density by right would be, just to give an idea on the balance of how 12 individuals in a residential care could also be 4 single-family homes, just looking at a space perspective.
And so when I look at that and read the staff report, to me, what I'm hearing, and you can tell me if I'm incorrect, is that someone else could come in and develop this lot, wouldn't have to go through this process at all. They could just do this subdivision and build these units, without, not any oversight, but without coming through this body and going without city council as well.
Correct. It would just be through a final plat process, but no public hearing or approval.
I didn't have, sorry. I didn't have time to look at the aerial. Are those concrete walking paths already there?
Off the site plan in the back?
Yeah.
For the pathway?
Yeah.
No, I believe they would be adding
Okay.
those within a fenced-in area they're proposing.
And those are all inside that fenced area, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, their fencing would meet up roughly with the detached garage and then follow the line here. So it wouldn't be, so the yard would actually
There's
extend
quite a bit of yard
much
behind.
further to the south. That would not be included within the fenced area.
And this is probably a question for the applicant, Ben, but the previous one, when it was for a larger number, and so there was the addition, one of the things that was going to be added was an elevator. Is there still a plan for an elevator? Do you know?
That may be a good
Yeah.
question for them on their interior.
So everything on that site plan that you have up right now, there's no, I don't know how to, this part right here, that's already existing, or is that what they're adding on?
I think that would be added on as well as all patio or deck
Okay.
area to the back. Originally, they had the actual addition to the home shown here, but now it would all just be outdoor space
Okay.
patio.
Thank you. Oh, I have one more question, and I think I know the answer, but I just want to kind of cover this again. Also in the letter, in the neighborhood letters, they talked about, the appropriateness, or they looked at other special permits for this type of use, and they were much lower density. But this density is calculated on square footage, so because this is a bigger footprint, they allow more residents here.
That's correct, yeah. For the special permit, it goes truly off lot size is what.
So the ones they might have been comparing it to probably had a smaller footprint, and that's why they only had that many residents allowed.
Yes, and specifically, they have the location on 84th off of Pinedale, and that was a lower number, but calculated exactly off of the lot size.
Thank you.
And again, how many would be allowed off of this lot size?
I believe this one would be up to 26.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Ben. Testimony from the applicant.
Good afternoon, members of the Planning Commission. Danae Kalkowski, Seacrest and Kalkowski Law Firm, 1128 Lincoln Mall, Suite 100, representing Harbor Senior Care. Also with me today, Chris Gilley, CEO of the Harbor Senior Care, and Katie Hartman. She's an RN and the Director of Nursing and Administration for the organization. We're going to kind of do a three-pronged thing. I know some of you were here last time and got some of the background information, but I think we have a couple members here today who weren't. So I'm going to let Chris and Katie talk a little bit about the business model, why here, what they're doing, and then I'll come back up and, hit a few things on the site plan, some of the neighborhood outreach, and some of the changes that we've made to the plan. And then we'll all be available for questions, or you can ask them as you have them too.
Thanks, Danae.
Thank you. Again, Chris Gilly, 3101 North 177th Street in Omaha, 68116. And so I just wanted to share a few things real quick, and then Katie, who's my sister, will come up here as well. But ultimately, what we do at the Harbor Senior Care was the idea of my sister. About 3 years ago, after spending 20 plus years as an RN here in the Lincoln community, spending a lot of those times in the senior care area, had approached me and said, I think there's a better way, a different way of doing this. And she was approaching me because I had spent the last 20 plus years as an entrepreneur, really taking a lot of what were ideas into reality. For reference, the very first thing I did from a business standpoint was one of the founders of Champions Fund Center back in 1995 as a senior at UNL. And so I've spent a lot of my career, helping take ideas from an idea to something of significance and something of impact. And so initially I said, well, let's research this because I don't know a whole lot about it. But what I could clearly see, because we had grandparents, both on my wife's side and on our side, that had lived years in assisted living facilities and passed away there. We also grew up with a mom who worked in a nursing home. So we spent a lot of our evenings and weekends doing special music and playing bingo and those types of things. So we had a reference point, but from my standpoint, I stood back and I said, I can clearly see the gap of what exists today and what doesn't exist today. And in senior care, your options primarily are, everybody wants to be at home, ultimately. That's their desire. And you can either, as you get to a point where you need ongoing care, you can hire someone to come into your home and take care of you. The challenge with that is that just financially, is not a viable option at some point. And so the next option then is primarily what's out there are large institutional settings. And there's a lot of places that are beautiful, so I'm not here to knock that. I'm just saying that's a pretty big gap. And especially when we're talking about people that suffer from memory loss, from things like Alzheimer's disease and dementia. And so as Katie began to talk about that and we began to research it, we got connected with an organization called RAL, which is Residential Assisted Living, and they have a national association. And we learned that there's this concept out there called RAL that is rapidly going across the United States. In fact, they have over 30,000 homes in their database. And so we joined that organization. I sent Katie down to Phoenix for a week to get trained. It has been a place of networking, of best practices, of being able to go to other communities and see these exact type of homes in other communities, and obviously ongoing support and advocacy. But from my standpoint, and I guess real quick, just to help define what I mean by residential assisted living, number one, it's real homes and real neighborhoods. That's what this concept is. In specifically in Nebraska, but in most states, it means you go through the state licensing process. So we've gone through and been licensed by the state of Nebraska, and we also are endorsed as a memory care facility. We have a very low caregiver ratio, which is much different than larger facilities. We really focus on individualized care. Most of these homes nationally have 8 to 16 residents. That is the model around RAL. They're very community-based, and again, they're small, so they're not overwhelming. And the residents live like they're living in a home, because they are, very much, and they spend 80% of their time in community instead of a really nice apartment suite where they're primarily by themselves. Now, as the brother and investor in this, I had 3 big questions. Like, hey, okay, I love what I'm hearing. I can really see where this is going to make an impact. I believe in my sister, both from a professional standpoint and her drive. I believe we could be a team that would be the right people to bring a new concept into the community of Lincoln. But I had 3 big questions. Number one, I don't know the process. I'm not a developer. This is not what I've done. So can we get through the hoops, both with the city and the state and those things? Number 2, can we build a great team of caregivers? that are there for our people? Can we provide a great service? And then third was, can we get residents, right? If you build it, will they come? And so we acquired our first home in 2021. We went through this very process in January of 2022. Ironically, at that point, I just did everything myself. I submitted drawings, traced on paper, and I mean, we really just kind of DIY'd our entire way through the process. But by July of 2022, we had a licensed home by the state of Nebraska, and we opened, and within 30 days, we were completely full of residents. And so that obviously was some great proof of concept. But what we knew when we did that first home, because we actually tried to acquire a couple other homes, was a home of 6 isn't really it's not a real sustainable model for us financially. But I said, but what it does is gives us really a small focus initially to make sure that we have an opportunity to put together all of our systems, our processes, we acquire the technology. Like we just do everything without the pressure of trying to be bigger than we need to be. So that was our first home. I've got a few more things I want to share, but one consistent message that we continue to hear from people that come in our home and observe, whether it's healthcare workers, doctors, hospice workers, whether it's certainly families, but there's 2 messages I consistently hear. And number 1 is, my family member has come back alive. And so we believe strongly that is because of the environment that we have created in these homes. We are seeing people who are basically almost on their deathbed and coming back alive. And the second thing that and again, that's both family and doctors that are saying that about our residents. And the second is, and this is from the families, I just don't worry anymore. I don't feel like I always have to come check up. I'm not up in the middle of the night because I just know they're being taken care of. And that really comes down to our lower caregiver ratio, primarily, and just the individualized care that we do. I'm sure Katie will share about, the residents that we have and why it is they've chosen to become part of what we do at the harbor. I, again, as primarily an outsider, as a brother, as a supporter, as an investor, just trying to help my sister make this dream come true, I have been absolutely amazed. To the point where I call it now conviction. Like, to me, we have to figure out how to continue to do this because it's just the right thing. And I understand as a community member and a neighbor that we all fear things that we don't know what it is when it comes into our neighborhood. But I've just observed it. And we've had people come in and observe and just said, you need to find a way to get more people to see what you guys are doing here. So Katie's going to come up and share, more about the concept. Our attorney Danae is going to come up and share the process that we have gone through. Now that we've gone back, we took a couple of months off and really just said, we want to do the right thing. How can we improve our application? And so Danae will share that as well. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Katie Hartman, 7800 North 134th Street, Waverly, Nebraska. I am the current administrator and director of nursing at our home on Pinedale, and I absolutely have a passion for memory care and just the seniors in general. This year has been amazing. Like Chris told you, we have been full since we opened, and we have had 2 deaths so far in the first year, and we just had someone come in that was on a waiting list and immediately replace the previous resident, although we do miss them dearly. So just to tell you a little bit about how we operate in the home, we're basically just a family. So these residents have dementia, so they a lot of times don't necessarily remember their home, but it's about how it made them feel, right? It's all about how they feel, how they are around people that love them and care for them. And the one thing that's real different is that our caregivers actually can have a relationship with the people they care for. So if you go into bigger facilities, a lot of time they don't have time. They're caring for too many people. They have certain tasks they have to check off the list. We actually have a requirement for our caregivers. Not only do they do every single thing for them, we're talking bathing, cleaning, laundry, activities, everything with them. So they really get to know what they like, what they don't. And this is a service, you know, as much as this is a business, this is a service we're providing for the community. The type of residents that we have are well known in the community. We have a retired neonatologist. We have a wife of a radiologist. We have business owners that are currently living in our home. So we're not necessarily targeting that, but we do target clientele that have prepared for their future. It is our vision in the future as we are able to grow to be able to provide Medicaid beds for homes, but we have to get to a place where we're thriving and able to do that. But that's definitely in our vision of what we want to do. So when I think about the neighborhood that we're going into, the people that we currently have in our home at Pinedale are the type of people that would live in this type of neighborhood. And so with that being said, just as when we have younger children, a lot of people choose to put their children in a home care versus sending them to a bigger facility. This is an option for this group of people that want more individualized care to be able to be in a smaller setting. And we know that they thrive in that. I mean, it's been tested, we have seen it, and there's proof. And there are families who are extremely happy with what we're doing. The neighbors, we've had no issues with the neighbors at all. And it's no different than just having a big family living in a home, ultimately.
Cindy?
Yes, Dick.
With only 6 occupants at the present time, and 2 of them passing away and you replacing them, have you run into any situations of, with the dementia, some belligerence from individuals? And if so, does it get bad enough to where you have to remove them from your home?
Sure.
Or is there ways you can deal with that?
Sure. So that's a great question, because we know as with dementia, there are people who run into those issues. We have health at home consultants who come in, and so we have medications available. So it's basically like having your doctor come to your home and to be able to prescribe the medications needed. So towards the end, hospice comes on board. And helps out with some of those medications that require people, or that help with some of the times when people are delirious or don't know what they're doing and saying, and that happens towards the end, typically in this, with this disease process, but never to the point where it's affected anybody else in the home. We've been able to separate. We have a basement and an upstairs, and so, and at this point, this person was just bedridden at the time this was happening, so it hasn't been an issue in that regards. For state licensure, if we ever would have to run into that and there was a safety issue with other people in the home, it would be required for us to remove them or say they can't be in our home. We absolutely look at what is, you know, the safety for everyone in the home. You know, is this a good fit for us? Is it a good fit for you? You know, that sort of thing. So,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Sorry, Danae. So I'm trying to judge trips per day, because I know that's a concern for
Sure.
some of the neighbors. So do the because I know these people have to see doctors, or, you know, do the doctors come to your facility? Do you have to take them to the doctor's office? How does that work?
For the most part, they will come to the home, but it's not a regular thing. So these are people who know this is the last stop in life, and actually every one of the residents we have are all DNI, so they know that they're not going to be getting any huge, you know, major medical care. But when I think of it, doctor's visits is if I notice a symptom that would be related to a urinary tract infection, I can call them and they can make a stop in, see us, give us an antibiotic, and then are able to treat it right there. So it's not something that's daily. It's not even something that's weekly.
Okay. And I don't know if one of you guys are gonna talk about this, but can you tell me like what kind of interior modifications you're making to the house as to, just so that there are concerns like, could this ever be deconverted back to a single-family house?
Right. We're not changing it to that much. We're adding an elevator. Yes, we are adding an elevator, and yes, we do put in a sprinkler system like you guys have here. And mostly the safety features are just ADA compliancy. So it's just to suit somebody who is handicapped, and needs those. So it's nothing that would change it being livable as a regular home in the future.
We talked about this last time, but to clarify, when people hear an elevator going in, they think the big commercial elevators.
Right.
So just to clarify, this is a residential area that is contained within the home. You're not going to build a big elevator shaft on the outside of the house.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
You guys have mentioned your Pinedale facility. Is that in Lincoln?
Right. It's 8421 Pinedale Court. It's just south of Messiah Lutheran, and it's in a cul-de-sac.
Right.
And that was a home that had already been.
I think I remember
It
when
was
you guys
already
came.
accessible, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, Janae.
All right, thank you very much.
And if you have additional questions at the end for Katie and Chris, they'll be available. I just thought I'd go over briefly because there were a couple of questions about what would be the changes to the site as a result of this. Because we're limiting the number of residents to 12, no physical changes to the house, no additions added. So the living space will be within the footprint of the house. There is an exterior deck that would be added on and kind of worked around the existing. There's a big existing tree in the backyard. And when you go into the house, there are big, huge windows and a nice big open room that have a great view of the backyard. So I think between that open space in the house and the added deck space will be a wonderful, wonderful environment for their residents. Also be adding just that walking path through there, and then as Ben mentioned, just a fence, but we still have a lot of yard that's back behind even the fenced-in area. There will be the parking stalls added here to provide for the required parking that's needed. And then I think we're making the drive a circle drive just for ease of people, deliveries, being able to pull up and pull right back out without even being on the edge near the neighborhood. So those are kind of the changes. But I think, probably the largest one was to reduce the density so that there was no change to the existing home, right? And that seemed to be a concern of neighbors with the amount of residents. When I started visiting with Katie and Chris, as Chris mentioned, they're new to this process in Lincoln. And so we talked about how to maybe go back and try and engage the neighbors a little bit more to address some of the specific concerns that the neighbors had with respect to the application. And so prior to submittal, we did hold a neighborhood meeting at the house. We had about 11 neighbors attend. We received feedback, some of which had heard before, and maybe a couple things that were new. Based upon that feedback, we made 4 or 5 revisions to the plan before we resubmitted. Once we submitted back on the 13th of June, within that next week, we sent a letter back out to the neighbors, everybody on the mailing list, and everybody who had testified previously at Planning Commission or City Council were sent in a letter. We sent out a letter explaining the new application, going through the changes and revisions that we were making to address their concerns. And to date, I don't think we've received any additional feedback from that. That doesn't mean there aren't still neighbor concerns, and I think there's some neighbors here, but we didn't get additional comments or questions from that. Just maybe to go through a quick summary of the revisions, I think Ben mentioned a couple of them, but I want to make sure that we hit all of those for you. Probably the largest one, obviously, is that reduction in the density of the residents, because it allows us to stay within the existing footprint of the home, and there's ample room within the footprint of the home to serve those 12 residents. Added some stormwater language, a note. There were some comments previously about what about the additional runoff from adding this parking? There's already, water issues. So we have added a note to the site plan that says we will have an engineer take a look at what additional runoff may be created by improvements. So that would just be basically the deck, the walking path, and then the parking area. And if we have increased stormwater runoff as a result of that, we will create a little detention basin on the site to hold the water, just like we would with a new development, hold the water so that it goes out at the same rate it would have pre any improvements. Now, one of the things on the site plan you might see is that there is going to be an attempt to use some kind of more permeable surfaces for the parking area that would also reduce that runoff and actually reduce probably the impact of what, you know, that parking area may look like. So there are going to be some attempts made to even reduce that. So by the time we do that, I'm not sure, you know, that there'll be a significant difference in the stormwater runoff, but we're going to do that calculation anyway and take care of it if we need to. We have to add additional landscaping on this west side where the parking stalls will go. This is an existing garage and this is an existing building. So we're really just impacting the area between those already two existing buildings. There's a wood fence there, and so the additional landscaping will just help provide additional screening for that parking area to those neighbors. And then finally, Ben mentioned one of the concerns with the neighbors was you're asking for approval of a residential healthcare facility, and there's a lot of things that can go into a residential healthcare facility. It could be turned into a group home all of a sudden for 15 people, and then, you know, what would we have to say about that? That obviously is not the intent of this applicant. It really is to use it for the assisted living, residential assisted living, and so we were willing to put the restriction on that this special permit is very limited 12 residents and to an residential assisted living memory care, right? And so even if we sell it, that restriction stays. If somebody wants to come in and do something different, they can come back and ask to do something different and go through the public process. But we are trying to be very restrictive for just what we're trying to do. I think with these adjustments, we've further minimized what the impact might be for this use on the neighbors. Staying within the existing footprint, screening, additional screening, addressing stormwater, and then limiting the use. I think this property with its large backyard and house that has a really open floor plan and large windows will really provide a wonderful environment for seniors with memory care issues to live in really a residential home. As Ben mentioned also, this furthers the comprehensive plan's goal of complete neighborhoods where we have spots for people of all ages to live and continue, you know, to live in a residential dwelling. This does not change the physical nature of the site. It really continued to function as a home, just now a home for seniors who have memory care issues. You did approve the original application with a 6-0 vote. And I think with these modifications, we've hoped we've adjusted even more of the potential impacts. And so we'd be asking for your approval of this revised application also. And any of the three of us would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions on this end? Questions down here?
How many bedrooms are in there right now?
So it was, when purchased, it was a 5-bedroom home. And through modifications, there is an additional room in the basement where we would do an egress window. So there'll be 6 bedrooms.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
You.
At this time, we will have testimony in support. Is there anyone here who wishes to testify in a neutral capacity? All right, we will move on then to testimony in opposition.
Good afternoon. My name is Regina Blazek. I live at 3636 South 37th, and I'm an adjacent neighbor to the property. I know that this is a formal, this is kind of a formality, and that they've met the needs of your requirements for approval. And, I did bring along the letters that the neighbors received. And you can have that. Apologies, part of the logo is cut off, but the signature is still at the bottom and is available for you. We understand the value of the property and that the current zoning regulatory things. Oh, I want to talk a little bit more about myself. I am a government consultant, and I work in the Medicaid and child welfare space, and have for the last 14 years. So I've spent the last 14 years of my career where my primary concern is protecting the interests of the most vulnerable individuals in society. That being said, I don't think anybody thought they were going to build a 30-foot elevator shaft. We knew what kind of elevator was going to go in. And our primary concern is that this is an antique residential neighborhood. It doesn't compare to the 84th location because zoning has changed since that time. The streets are wider, more parking is required, sidewalks are required. Lots of different things are now currently required when you build than they were when this neighborhood began in 1954, when the majority of the houses adjacent to this property were built. This is also a neighborhood that is highly trafficked by children because we are surrounded by elementary and junior high and high schools. And we are fortunate enough to have children afoot and a bike relatively constant without having the luxury of sidewalks for them to play on. We currently already have traffic overflow from adjacent streets if anything is going on that potentially jeopardizes them, and we've requested that a traffic study be done, and it was the last time, what do you think about traffic? Oh, I think traffic will be fine. Well, we are here to formally request that a traffic study be performed in September when the burden of traffic is present. June, July, and August are not the problematic months. It's the other 9 months of the school year. That being said, the stormwater problem already exists. Any change potentially is going to create additional harm. So to not do the study in front of the improvements, I challenge that word as well. It's a pretty nice piece of property as she sits right now. She doesn't require a lot of improvements if all you want to do is have a residential house there. It's a very nice house. It's been a very nice house for a very long time. So those represent the concerns of the residents. We cede the point that this fills a need. We cede the point that this is a societal challenge. We get it. It's a neighborhood full of educated people that can understand what's said to them. We understood what was said to us in this letter. Completely. We just feel that it is potentially not in the interest of the current residents and not in the interest of the people who would be in this micro residential institution that is a business in this neighborhood. And that is the number one reason that we'll be back at council if this is approved today. Thank you.
I did have a question.
Sure.
Do you know the commercial space that's just a block down, when was that built?
It was built prior to the homes. It's approximately 70 years in there. much,
I just was double checking that it's, yeah, okay.
yeah, it's grandfathered in. I believe you're speaking to the one that was,
Carpet.
we call it carpet land. That's not what it's called anymore. It's like the Calvert business thing, but it's had no change in its footprint or its height in 70 years. You know, once in a while, they'll retar the blacktop, and that's about the end of their external improvements. And it was one of the first ones there. You had a question?
And Calvert Street does have sidewalks on both sides, is that correct? Or it does not in that area?
Well, Calvert Street does. But the side streets, it's inconsistent.
Yep.
Especially to the south, which would be potentially the, you know, where the lot slopes back, you know, that goes into the south where they're, you know, very inconsistent with the presence of sidewalks. Anything else?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Kathy Cady. I live at 3740 Calvert
You want to
Street.
go over to the microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry. Kathy Cady, I live at 3740 Calvert Street. It's directly across the street from the property. I find it interesting that they moved the street sign, 38th and Calvert Street sign, from our property over to the east side because of traffic and because of vision. They can't see. The city did that, and nobody's aware of that, I don't think. So they moved that, I think, around Easter time, and so that's a huge concern. The guy said, you can't see the sign. You can't see the sign, you can't see their driveway. It's the same situation. The reformed application, whatever, does not say we're going to do a traffic. It mentions the traffic not at all. It's not a concern of theirs. They haven't been in our neighborhood. They don't live in Lincoln. They don't know what a gem this is. This is not, it's superficial. It doesn't mention the traffic. It's nothing legally binding. Once it becomes something else, it'll never go back to a residential dwelling, a residential home. My mother-in-law lives on Hillside Circle, which is just catty corner really cut through 37th Street. That's where my husband grew up. She asked if we knew our new neighbors. I said, no, we don't know anybody over there because Calvert Street is too busy. The only reason we knew our neighbors, and the reason I know these properties so well, is we all raised children together. And I've been in there, and I will show you many pictures. I'd be glad to show you pictures. I know that property well, my daughter, I applaud the Stockwell and the 38th Street neighbors. It's beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous properties. Take a walk by there. You'll be impressed. And this is not a place to add more business. Look at the driveway. That is my biggest concern. I have a huge concern about the traffic flow and infrastructure. It seems that the city does not care about the infrastructure. They just want the business. Look at 40th and South Street. I like to go insane about that jet splash. There's no infrastructure. There's no infrastructure for this. No one wants a fence around this property. My daughter used to go exploring with the people directly to the east, all the way through over to Stockwell. And beautiful. Those kids had a beautiful time in that neighborhood. My husband grew up in that neighborhood. We plan to leave that piece of dirt to our child. That's all we have. I guess I don't even know. I don't want a sign there that says the harbor. I don't want it to become a business. It's a family home, and it's directly across the street. They call us neighbors. We're not their neighbor. They haven't spent any time there. I haven't seen them except for the night of the meeting, which I did not attend. I wanted to do traffic count that night instead, but I didn't sit out there. I've tried to be not rude. But no one is against the idea. It's just not for our neighborhood. Thanks.
Good afternoon. You've seen me before. Teresa, I go by Trixie Schmidt, 3727 Stockwell Street, Lincoln, Nebraska. I am not a neighbor. I'm 2 blocks away from this facility. My biggest reason to be against this, as I said before, is it is a business being placed in a well-established residential neighborhood. And in their testimony, or their talking, they said the word business model and they said the word institution. This is a business model. They are in this to make money. This is with good intentions. I don't say anything against that. It is with good intentions, but it is placing a business in a neighborhood. I don't think that should happen in Lincoln, Nebraska. I have a real hard time with this, reading other things in the paper recently about what you've all had to deal with other homes going in. But no matter how you look at it, it will be a business. It will affect the neighborhood. It will affect the people there. We will lose our quality that we had we've been there 47 years. I think it's wrong. I don't think it should be approved. I know you checked all the boxes. I see all your boxes. I know all of these, and I know you were there. And I know your vote probably, and I want you to know that we limited the number of people coming today because the city council, we will contest it and go to the city council. Everyone who testified at the council and here in the previous one, no one has changed their position. So we will be there, and we also don't want to waste your time. So we have limited the number of people just who are talking today, and actually the letters even that came in, just to keep us all happy with this whole issue. Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay.
Hello, my name is Pat Cole, and I live at 3801 Calvert Street, and I'm one of the ones who testified last time about concern about the drainage. It now goes across the Klein's yard and through my yard and down to Stockwell. Now the neighbors on Stockwell have had to move out twice because of flood water damage. And I don't know why, well, I think because we agreed to limit the speakers today. But I just wanted to say that I'm very concerned. Right now, for me, it's tolerable to have the drainage the way it is because it's away from my house, but there's no grass there. I won't grow grass, and I can see that it will eventually, if it gets worse, be a creek that runs through there. The fox might like it, but anyway, but my concern is too that they say they're going to do something, but once it's decided, do they really have to, or maybe make some superficial changes, but then say, oh, well, we tried. But I was also confused about the planning department talking about what could be put in there. Have you seen that? The other side of that house drops drastically. That's part of the drainage thing. It just goes down. And I don't think that you could do what he's talking about doing there, which was just a supposition, so I guess it doesn't matter. But and the other thing I wanted to mention was, again, the parking. I don't understand. I have friends who have husbands who are in these homes, and they visit every day. It's a car every day. And where are they going to park? And I visit friends. I'm of an age that I have friends in residential, in these independence homes, and they have huge parking areas, and sometimes I have trouble finding a parking place. And it just seems to me, with Calvert Street being no parking in many areas because it's a 2-lane street,
It's a bicycle path, and it goes to the school. Children walk to school along that street, and people drive along that street. Once somebody parks there, you have to wait, and if somebody gets by before you can drive through, it's a real problem. Now, when I got the first letter from them, in which they said that they wanted to put in a homey atmosphere, and I thought that sounded wonderful. I was thinking that it would be like what they have now, 5 or 6 people, and that would be a lovely homey atmosphere. But 16, 12, I'm not sure that provides that. But the main problem for me is the drainage and also the parking. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional testimony in opposition.
My name is William Hempel. I live at 3704 South 37th, right to the south of this proposed complex or commercial area. I'm going to kind of repeat, and then I won't be here very long, but the main thing for me is the density and the parking. Now, what's not been addressed about the parking and why I'm up here is not only is it continuous traffic, but is cars stopping and starting continuously. And that is a big concern to 5 neighbors that directly border the property. Fence or no fence, there is a noise issue. And the last thing I will say again, the density of this just does not match up with the neighborhood. Thank you.
Is there any further testimony in opposition? All right, staff questions. Questions for Ben?
Ben, is there a possible requirement for a drainage study?
Yes, and on the conditions for the special permit in the staff report, so part of that would be that with their improvements, they'd work with an engineer to submit any drainage requirement, and kind of, as Danae noted, if required. But we noted in there that would be before they could get an occupancy permit, that would have to be taken place.
You.
Signage. Someone asked about signage. Are they would have to get a permit or something to put a sign out front, or tell us a little bit about that.
And that I might fall on Steve for the sign requirement here because I don't have that.
You don't have it memorized?
Don't have it memorized, yeah. I should.
Steve Henriksen, Planning Department, nor do I have it memorized. But so there's 2 different categories in terms of signs. Every special permit is allowed a certain amount of signs. And then we have a few categories, and I think, so we'll start with first, what are the signs for just something not on the base on the special permit? So all the special permitted signs are allowed a sign that is no more than 20 square feet. It can't be located in the front yard and can't be more than 8 feet tall. And the final part of it would be is that the sign shall be keeping with the character of the area. So as part of a special permit, if they came in to show a sign, we would have some amount of review. It's a rather broad requirement. So, since this is a residentially zoned area, it cannot be illuminated. That's a requirement of all signs.
else have any other questions? Anything else, Ben? That
I do have one. If the neighbors want a traffic study, how would they go about requesting that?
I think, and I'll bring Bob up for traffic to talk on the study.
Bob Simmering to you. We can require a traffic study based on access management if they generate 100 vehicles per day in peak hour, which obviously this does not. We do continuous traffic counts over the city. They're not every year on every street, but they're enough that we have some sense of the growth of traffic. Then in addition to that, we do traffic studies around the school zones, particularly for pedestrian use, and that's an ongoing process. Typically, we would not do a traffic study, or we would not require a traffic study based on something of this size. And I would point out, like a single-family residence, just typically pulling straight out of the book generates 10 trips per day. When you have a facility like this that would not have residents that drive, you'd be looking at the traffic generated by staff, by medical, by visitors. And I would venture to say it probably wouldn't exceed those 10 units by far. It might, in some cases, be more, but that would be the same on a single-family residence as well. So this is not a case that we would feel motivated to do a traffic study. And point being, the traffic study is to ask the question, what does this facility do to the traffic, not what is the existing traffic. We know that already.
Thank you for explaining that.
All right, thank you. Applicant rebuttal.
I think I'll just hit a couple points for you. I'm going to let Chris talk just to give you a sense of the flow of traffic during the day, because it's not a lot and it's not all at once, and it would largely probably not be during school hours when the busy traffic would be on Calvert. But just to reiterate, and I think staff hit it on the stormwater, we can't solve an existing issue with stormwater here, right? And the size of this is small enough, we wouldn't have to do anything with stormwater with the small improvements that are being made. This was a condition that they voluntarily added to try to address the concern and minimize that there being any, I guess, accusation that you're making the problem worse, right? We're saying to the extent we would impact the drainage or cause additional stormwater with what we're doing, we will mitigate it on site, and it's a condition of our occupancy permit. It's a note on the plan that we do it. And so it just was one more thing offered to try to minimize any potential impact. There's no signage planned for the residents. So when somebody drives by, they're going to see the driveway, the little circular drive. It's going to look like a single-family residential home to anybody driving by on Calvert.
When I was looking at the house, I think one of the houses next door already has circle drives. They're pretty common.
Yes, especially on those big, wider lots along there.
I have a question. The staff parking, how it's arranged, can they drive out onto Calvert, or do they need to back out onto Calvert?
No, they'll be able to drive because one of the parking stalls is even a turnaround spot.
Okay. I do worry, children, sidewalks, cars, wheelchairs and cars.
Yeah. So there are the 5 parking stalls here, and then this little area right here is a turnaround. It's not a parking stall. So you have the ability to back out and drive out front facing. And you'll be coming back out right where the driveway would be.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yep. Chris, you want to just talk just a little bit about the flow of traffic in and out?
Yeah, and just to add on to what Danae just shared, we didn't just come up with language in regards to the concerns around water. We did have an engineer out on the property, so we had a time to get some consultation, and so that was at their at their advice was to add that. So I think with a lot of the concerns that we heard from the first planning meeting, to our meeting with City Council, to our meeting with the neighbors, and when we invited them out to the home, we've tried to be very empathetic and intentional in trying to address these. Specific to traffic, one of the things we did was we documented our visitors for a week at our Pinedale location, and then we attempted to kind of put together a model where we then extrapolated. We know we have more residents and a couple more employees, and so what would that look like if we kind of took that multiple of what we know exists today in a facility that we operate, and how would that look in this home? And so we walk through that at the meeting on our home, just to try to, now it doesn't solve for every single day, where every just like in any neighborhood, you're going to have a graduation or somebody's birthday, and more people than you would normally have at your house would show up. And so again, we operate in a similar manner, that every once in a while we were outside the bounds of what we consider to be day-to-day, week-to-week, what our norm is. And so we had that conversation. I think the other thing I've shared is just, yes, this isn't a residence, and I've shared this with this group before. I have 7 children, 6 who drive, and we have, and it's similar to some of my other neighbors. We have a pool in our backyard, and so it's very common that our friends have their friends over. And so, I think that's, whether it was, myself purchasing this home for personal use with my family, or if it was for, how we're intending to use it, I think that obviously how it's been used in the past isn't always the fair representative or expectation of a new buyer, a new purchaser. And so, that's from my perspective, it's one of those things, like I couldn't come, based on those expectations, I could not live in this house from a personal standpoint without facing, the same challenges. The only other note I had that I wanted to share on here was just, again, I like to call it say do. And I think, there were some comments made, how do we know they're going to do this? And again, I think even with putting this condition on the special use permit, that, it has to in order to keep the permit, it has to be the same, it has to have the same use to it. If there's any other use by a new owner or either ourselves, we very much understood that as a concern. I would have that concern in my neighborhood as well. And so we were willing to minimize, which ultimately if you just look at it from hey, it's property, it's an asset, as an owner of that, you start to minimize my opportunity to, if I had to go sell it, how I'd go sell it. Well, that was something that we were willing to do, because we only have one purpose for this home. We deeply, deeply believe in what we started, out on the south side of Lincoln, and we want to continue to do that. We want to have that impact, and that's one of the fun things about when you start something new, and you get people within your team to kind of buy into it. One of the things we talk about is, and we want to do more of these homes, and that creates more opportunities for employees. I mean, these people, these caregivers are 100% bought in. One of the things, a couple times we've had residents who have had to spend a stint at the hospital in order to get better. And our employees they show up at the hospital on their own accord. And I see this just because we have Facebook pages and all that stuff goes up there, and it's just like, wow, these girls, they don't have to. They're not being paid for this. But those are the kind of relationships that they build with the residents, and they care for them, they love them, and that speaks volumes to families. And so that's something that we just believe we want to continue to expand this residential service, real homes, real neighborhoods, an opportunity that hasn't been out there in the community of Lincoln. And so that's just. And I hear not in our neighborhood. Well, that's my biggest concern is there's a lot of neighborhoods that can say that. And the people that we have in our homes are the very people that have literally built their personal lives and their businesses and their influence in this community in those very neighborhoods.
Can you kind of outline the part, if if a family member's coming to visit, where would you expect them to park, like on the Circle Drive or like back in the
So,
five
yeah, in
stall?
our model, we actually show, so we typically have like a 7 o'clock and a 7 o'clock is kind of when our shift changes happen. And so the nice thing, and that's just how we already do it. The nice thing is that also minimize any impact with some of the school traffic, that neighbors are concerned with. And so in our model, even with employees coming and going, we pretty much always had 2 additional parking stalls back in our required parking area in the back. So because we've got 5 parking spaces proposed in the back of the house, plus 2 existing in the attached garage. So we have, it's really more than, with no residents driving and typically 3 to 4 at the most employees in the home, we have capacity already for family members. And then you do have the Circle Drive as well. Now, we'd like to keep that free because just like any home, Amazon will come to deliver something, or twice a week we have either Hy-Vee or Sam's Club come and deliver groceries. And so that's really the intention, is to quick get in and out. We don't do any large Cisco trucks or we shop like families would shop. And so and then as far as visitors, all of that gets scheduled. Again, because of the residents that we have we don't like surprises. And they don't tend to stay long because that often will wear down our residents. So they'll come in for a little bit, and that's always something that's scheduled so that it's not a surprise and so that it kind of fits into the schedule. And so it's really been, it's a pretty well-oiled machine from that standpoint.
So from a normal passerby from the street, they're not going to know that this isn't a normal residential family living there.
Right. No signage. Like that, we do that intentionally. We don't want to have a signage because we want it to continue to look just like it fits into the neighborhood. I think the only distinguishing factor to the naked eye, like in our home out of Pinedale, is we do have additional parking that is seen from the front of the home. And that's the nice thing about the setup of this property, is it really is tucked back behind the house, out of sight. So it will, we want it to continue to fit into the neighborhood.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would move that we close the public hearing.
Second, Joy.
Campbell,
Yes.
Core,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Public hearing closed.
And I would move that we approve special permit 23026.
Second, Joy.
Discussion?
Yeah, obviously this has been before us. I understand some of the concerns of the neighbors, but this is, I really don't consider this a business. It's basically a home where people are able to live based upon their needs. And as you ask, driving by, I don't think anybody's going to know any difference from this being a single-family residence to the special permit that's being requested here. These people aren't in a position to be out driving a car, so it's not going to increase traffic. That standpoint, all of our homes get deliveries for, Amazon and whatever else. So I don't see that this is going to make a great deal of difference. And I do think that after meeting with neighbors, that the owners and proposers of this project have listened to them and are doing the drainage study and are limiting the special permit to where it has to stay under that use. Those would be concerns that I would have too, and I think they're being well addressed. So I will be supporting this.
I agree with Commissioner Campbell. I think that once this goes in, there's not going to be much change. I don't think the neighbors are going to really notice much going on. So I will support it.
I will be supporting this as well. I appreciate the work that you've put in to address some concerns that people did have. But I really, and I applaud you for your continuous work and liked hearing the update on the other facility and how that was going, since that's now been in operation. And really appreciate the concept of family members being able to live in a home-like, smaller setting as opposed to an institution. So I will be voting in favor as well.
I do want to say too, like, thank you for working with the neighborhood and trying to alleviate their concerns and listening to them. That's huge for us. So thank you.
Shelley?
Campbell.
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Cruz.
Yes.
Edens.
Yes.
Joy.
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Approved 6-0.
At this time, anyone wishing to speak on an item that was not on today's agenda may do so.
I move that we adjourn.
Second, Campbell.
Campbell.
Yes.
Core.
Yes.
Cruz.
Yes.
Edens.
Yes.
Joy.
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
We are adjourned.
Thank you.